If somebody had asked me a few years ago what the scariest moment of my life would be, I probably would have imagined something dramatic, maybe a car accident or some kind of disaster. What I never would have expected was that the most terrifying experience of my life would begin with something so ordinary that I almost ignored it completely. Looking back, that's probably what scares me most. There wasn't a single moment when I realized I was in danger. It happened slowly, one small thing after another. By the time I understood what was happening, someone had already become a part of my life without me ever inviting them into it. This happened in the fall of 2024, when I was 28 years old and living alone outside Indianapolis. I worked as a maintenance technician for a commercial property company. My routine rarely changed. I left for work around 7 every morning, got home around 5, went to the gym a few times a week, and spent most evenings relaxing at home. Nothing about my life would have made me stand out. At least, that's what I thought. One Tuesday evening after work, I stopped at a grocery store to pick up a few things. It was crowded, and I didn't notice anything unusual until I reached the checkout line. There was a man standing behind me. He looked to be in his 40s, wearing a dark baseball cap and a faded blue jacket. The only reason I remember him is because every time I looked up, he seemed to already be looking at me, not smiling, not angry, just staring. It was uncomfortable enough that I left the store feeling relieved to get away from him. By the time I loaded my groceries into my truck, I had already forgotten about it. 3 days later, I was leaving work when I saw the same man sitting in a silver sedan across the street from our parking lot. At first, I wasn't sure it was him, but as I drove past, I caught a clear look at his face. It was definitely the same guy. That felt strange, but not enough to alarm me. Maybe he worked nearby. Maybe it was a coincidence. A week passed, then another. I didn't see him again. Life returned to normal. Then one Friday night, I was taking out the trash when I noticed something tucked under my front doormat. It was a folded piece of paper. I assumed it was an advertisement until I opened it. Inside was a single sentence written in black marker. "You should close your upstairs blinds at night." My stomach dropped instantly. The upstairs bedroom window faced the backyard. The only way someone would know whether the blinds were open or closed was if they'd been watching the house. I immediately walked around the property with a flashlight but found nothing. No footprints, no vehicles, no people. I called a friend and tried laughing it off, but deep down I felt uneasy. The next day, I installed security cameras around the house. For almost 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then at 2:13 in the morning, my phone alerted me to motion in the backyard. Half asleep, I opened the camera feed. A man was standing near the fence. The image was grainy, but I could tell he wasn't just passing through. He was facing the house, standing completely still, watching. My heart started pounding. I switched to another camera angle. Before I could get a better look, he walked away. Police responded but found nobody nearby. The footage wasn't clear enough for identification. The officer suggested it could have been a trespasser or someone cutting through yards. I wanted to believe him. Unfortunately, things only got worse. About a week later, I left the gym around 9 at night. As I pulled onto the road, I noticed headlights behind me. Again, nothing unusual at first, but after several turns, the vehicle remained behind me. Every turn, every lane change, every stop sign. Still there. I started feeling nervous. To test my suspicion, I turned into a random neighborhood I'd never been through before. The car followed. That's when panic started creeping in. I made another turn, then another. The headlights stayed behind me. Finally, I pulled into a brightly lit gas station. The vehicle slowed as it approached. As it passed under the lights, I saw the driver, the man from the grocery store. He looked directly at me as he drove by. Then he continued down the road and disappeared. I immediately called the police. Unfortunately, without a plate number, there wasn't much they could do. For the next several weeks, I became increasingly paranoid. Every strange car caught my attention. Every unfamiliar face made me nervous. Friends told me I was overreacting. Maybe they would have felt differently if they had experienced what happened next. It was a Thursday night. Around 11 o'clock, I was sitting in my living room watching television when I heard a noise outside. It sounded like metal scraping against metal. At first, I assumed it was an animal. Then I heard it again, this time louder. I muted the television and listened. The sound was coming from the side of the house. I grabbed a flashlight and looked through the window. Nothing. The yard appeared empty. As I turned away, another noise echoed from the backyard. Then another. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. I locked every door and checked every window before going upstairs. Around midnight, I finally fell asleep. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of breaking glass. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard it again. Glass shattering somewhere downstairs. Adrenaline instantly flooded my body. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher answered while I quietly locked my bedroom door. Then came the sound I'll never forget. Footsteps. Slow footsteps moving through my house. Someone had broken in. The dispatcher kept telling me officers were on the way. Meanwhile, the footsteps continued, moving room to room, occasionally stopping, then continuing again. Whoever was downstairs wasn't rushing. They were taking their time, as if they knew exactly where they were. I remember staring at the bedroom door while every possible scenario raced through my mind. Then the footsteps reached the staircase. I heard each step creak as the person slowly climbed upward. One step, another, closer and closer. I could barely breathe. The dispatcher was still speaking, but I could hardly hear her over the pounding of my heartbeat. The footsteps reached the second floor. Silence followed. Then I heard movement directly outside my bedroom. Whoever had entered my house was standing on the other side of the door. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, the doorknob slowly turned. I nearly dropped my phone. The person outside began pushing against the door, not violently, just testing it, checking whether it was locked. Then everything became quiet again. I don't know how long he stood there. It felt like forever. Finally, I heard movement away from the room. Then, distant footsteps heading back downstairs. Moments later, police sirens filled the street. Officers entered the house and searched every room. The intruder was gone. He had escaped through the same rear window he'd used to enter. But he left something behind. On my kitchen table, officers found a backpack. Inside were gloves, duct tape, zip ties, a flashlight, bottled water, and several notebooks. One of the notebooks contained detailed observations about me. My work schedule, gym visits, grocery store trips, vehicle information, notes about when lights turned on and off inside my house. Some entries were dated nearly 4 months earlier. The realization made me sick. Someone had been studying my life for months. Detectives eventually identified the suspect through fingerprints found on items inside the backpack. It turned out he had a lengthy criminal history involving burglary, stalking, kidnapping attempts, and home invasions. According to investigators, he often selected victims randomly and became obsessed with them over time. Nobody knows exactly why he chose me. Maybe I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe he saw me at that grocery store and decided I looked vulnerable. Whatever the reason, I later learned I wasn't his first target. Fortunately, investigators arrested him 3 days later at a motel nearly 60 miles away. Evidence recovered during the arrest linked him to multiple stalking cases across 2 states. Even now, years later, I still think about how close things came to ending differently. The part that stays with me isn't the break-in itself, it's knowing that for months I was completely unaware someone was watching me. While I was going to work, meeting friends, buying groceries, and living my life, a stranger was quietly collecting pieces of it from a distance. People imagine danger as something obvious, a masked criminal, a weapon, a dramatic confrontation. In reality, the most dangerous people often look completely normal. They're the person standing behind you in line. The driver parked across the street. The stranger you notice for a second and immediately forget. That's what makes this story so unsettling to me. Because before everything happened, I saw that man several times, and every single time I dismissed the feeling that something wasn't right. I don't ignore those feelings anymore. The thing that still bothers me about this story is how close I came to ignoring every warning sign. When people hear stories about criminals targeting random victims, they usually assume there were obvious red flags. They imagine someone acting suspicious or threatening from the beginning. That's not how it happened to me. The guy who nearly ruined my life looked completely normal. If you passed him on the street, you wouldn't have thought twice about him. That's probably why he got as far as he did. This happened in late 2023 when I was 31 years old and living alone in a small town outside Nashville, Tennessee. I worked as an HVAC technician, which meant I spent most of my days driving from house to house making repairs. My schedule changed constantly, but my evenings were usually the same. I'd get home around 6, make dinner, watch television, and go to bed. It wasn't an exciting life, but it was comfortable. The first time I saw the man was at a convenience store near my apartment. I stopped there after work to buy a drink and a few snacks. While I was waiting in line, I noticed a guy standing near the coffee machines. He wasn't doing anything strange. The only reason I remember him is because he seemed to be paying more attention to me than anything else around him. Every time I glanced over, his eyes were already on me, not aggressively, just watching. I paid for my stuff and left. By the time I got home, I'd completely forgotten about him. About a week later, I was filling up my truck at a gas station across town. While the pump was running, I looked toward the road and immediately recognized the same man. He was sitting alone in a parked SUV facing the gas station. Again, he appeared to be watching me. I remember feeling slightly uncomfortable, but eventually convincing myself it was a coincidence. Nashville wasn't exactly a tiny place, but seeing the same person twice wasn't impossible. A few days after that, I was leaving a grocery store when I saw him again. This time, he was walking through the parking lot. As I loaded groceries into my truck, I noticed him stop near the row behind mine. He stood there for several seconds before continuing toward the opposite side of the lot. I watched him climb into a dark SUV and drive away. The moment stuck with me because something felt off. I couldn't explain why. There was no crime, no confrontation, just a feeling. Looking back, I wish I had trusted it. The next month passed without incident. Then one night around 10 o'clock, I received a text from an unknown number. The message simply said, "You should really replace that porch light." I stared at the screen in confusion. The bulb above my apartment door had burned out earlier that week. Very few people knew that. I responded asking who it was. No reply ever came. I called the number. It went straight to voicemail. The next day, I convinced myself it was probably one of my neighbors messing around. It was a strange message, but hardly something worth worrying about. Then another text arrived 3 nights later. "You got home late tonight." This time my stomach dropped. I hadn't told anyone where I'd been. After work, I'd gone to a friend's house to watch a football game. The text arrived less than 10 minutes after I walked through my apartment door. Whoever sent it knew when I got home. I immediately called the police non-emergency line. Unfortunately, there wasn't much they could do. The number appeared to be from a prepaid phone. I blocked it and tried moving on. For a while, things were quiet again. Then, one Saturday morning, I discovered that someone had entered my truck overnight. Nothing had been stolen. My registration papers were still there. My tools were untouched. Even the loose cash in the center console remained. The only thing out of place was a photograph. It was sitting on the driver's seat. The picture showed my apartment building. Specifically, it showed my apartment door. The photo appeared to have been taken from the parking lot sometime after dark. My blood ran cold. I immediately called police. Officers searched the area and dusted for prints, but they found nothing useful. The photograph became evidence, but there were no leads. After that, I started paying closer attention to my surroundings. I checked mirrors while driving. I looked around parking lots before getting out of my truck. I even changed some of my daily routines. That's when I started noticing the SUV. The dark SUV appeared everywhere. Sometimes it was parked across the street from a job site. Sometimes it sat near my apartment complex. Other times it appeared behind me in traffic before turning away. I never got a clear look at the driver, but deep down, I knew it was connected. One evening after work, I stopped at a home improvement store to buy supplies. As I exited the building, I spotted the SUV parked several rows away. A man was sitting inside. Even from that distance, I recognized him immediately. The convenience store guy, the gas station guy, the grocery store guy. The same man I'd seen multiple times over the previous months. The moment he realized I was looking at him, he started the vehicle and drove away. That's when fear turned into certainty. This wasn't coincidence anymore. Somebody was following me. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation escalated. More anonymous texts arrived from different numbers. Some referenced places I'd visited that day. Others mentioned things I was wearing. None contained direct threats. In some ways, that made them worse. The messages felt like reminders that I was being watched. Constantly. One Friday night, I decided to stay with my brother who lived about 40 minutes away. I didn't tell anyone except him. Around midnight, we were sitting in his living room watching television when his dog suddenly began barking at the front window. The barking was aggressive and non-stop. We looked outside. A dark SUV sat parked across the street. My stomach instantly dropped. My brother grabbed his phone and stepped onto the porch. The SUV drove away immediately. At that point, even he admitted something wasn't right. The next morning, we reported everything again. This time, detectives became more involved. They advised me to document every incident and save every message. Unfortunately, the suspect remained unidentified. Then came the night everything finally exploded. It was a Tuesday. I got home around 7 and spent the evening watching movies. Around 11:30, I heard a faint sound outside my apartment. At first, I ignored it. Then, I heard it again. A soft, metallic noise, like someone testing a door handle. I muted the television and listened carefully. The sound came from the hallway outside my apartment. My heart immediately began racing. I quietly approached the door and looked through the peephole. A man stood directly outside. The same man. He wasn't knocking, he wasn't speaking. He was crouched beside my doorknob, working on something. The moment I saw a metal tool in his hand, I stepped backward and called 911. The dispatcher told me officers were already being sent. Meanwhile, the man continued working at the lock. Every second felt endless. Then suddenly he stopped. For several moments, he remained completely still. That's when I realized he might have heard me moving inside. Slowly, he stood up. I watched through the peephole as he stared directly toward the door. Then he smiled. I'll never forget that smile. It wasn't angry. It wasn't excited. It looked calm, almost confident, like he believed he'd eventually get inside no matter what happened tonight. Then he walked away. Police arrived less than 3 minutes later. Officers searched the area and located the suspect attempting to leave through the apartment complex parking lot. After a brief chase, he was arrested. What investigators discovered afterward terrified me. Inside his SUV, they found photographs of my apartment, my workplace, my truck, and several locations I regularly visited. They also recovered notebooks filled with observations about my daily routine dating back nearly 6 months. Detectives later told me he had a criminal history involving stalking and attempted abduction. He had become fixated on me for reasons nobody could explain. During interviews, he refused to answer questions about his intentions. To this day, I still don't know what he planned to do if he got through that door. Maybe robbery, maybe kidnapping, maybe something worse. I moved away shortly after the case ended. Even now, years later, I still check parking lots before walking to my vehicle. I still glance over my shoulder when I hear footsteps behind me. Because the scariest thing I learned from that experience is that you don't always know when you're someone's target. Sometimes the person watching you isn't hiding in shadows or wearing a mask. Sometimes they're standing 10 feet away pretending to be just another stranger while quietly learning everything about your life. I used to think people exaggerated when they talked about trusting their instincts. You always hear stories where someone says they got a bad feeling about a person, and later that person turned out to be dangerous. I never really believed in that. I figured there was always some obvious sign they noticed subconsciously, something that explained the feeling. After what happened to me, I don't think that anymore. Sometimes your brain notices things before you consciously understand them. Sometimes a person can seem completely normal while every instinct in your body is quietly telling you to get away from them. This happened in the spring of 2024 when I was 27 years old, living in Western Pennsylvania. I worked for a company that serviced ATMs and cash machines throughout several counties. Most of my job involved driving long distances alone and stopping at businesses to perform maintenance. Because of that, I spent a lot of time on the road. One Thursday afternoon, I finished a service call at a small shopping plaza about an hour from home. It was raining lightly, and I decided to stop at a diner before heading back. The place wasn't busy, maybe 6 or 7 customers total. I grabbed a booth near the window and ordered a burger. About 10 minutes later, a man walked in and sat alone across the room. I probably wouldn't have remembered him if not for what happened later. He looked completely ordinary. Mid-40s, brown jacket, short beard, average build. The only thing that stood out was how often I caught him looking at me. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But every time I glanced across the diner, he'd quickly look away. It was strange enough that I noticed, but not alarming. When I finished eating, I paid my bill and left. As I walked through the parking lot, I noticed the man exiting the diner as well. He climbed into a black pickup truck parked several spaces away. I drove off and didn't think about him again. About 30 minutes later, I stopped at a gas station. While filling my truck, I happened to look toward the road and immediately recognized the black pickup. It was pulling into the same station. My first thought was that it was an odd coincidence. The driver parked near the side of the building and remained inside the vehicle. Something about it made me uncomfortable. I finished pumping gas and left. The pickup remained where it was. A few miles later, I checked my mirror. The black truck was behind me. At first, I didn't panic. Plenty of people travel the same highways. But after 20 minutes, the truck was still there. Every turn I made, it followed. Every lane change, every exit ramp. My stomach started tightening. I decided to test my suspicion by pulling into a grocery store parking lot. The truck drove past without stopping. I immediately felt stupid for worrying. Maybe it really had been a coincidence. I went home and forgot about it. 3 weeks passed. Nothing unusual happened. Then, one evening after work, I stopped at a hardware store. As I exited with my purchases, I saw a black pickup parked near the edge of the lot. My heart sank. The driver sat behind the wheel looking down at something. I couldn't see his face clearly. Still, the truck looked identical. I told myself I was being paranoid. There had to be thousands of similar vehicles in Pennsylvania. Yet, as I loaded my purchases into my truck, I noticed the pickup pulling away. As it passed, I saw the driver. It was the man from the diner. This time there was no doubt. He looked directly at me as he drove by. The feeling that hit me wasn't fear yet. It was confusion. Why did I keep seeing this guy? A few days later, I received a strange phone call while eating dinner. The number was unknown. When I answered, nobody spoke. I listened for several seconds before hanging up. 5 minutes later, the same number called again. Silence. Then it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Eventually, I stopped answering. The calls continued anyway. Around that time, I started noticing other things. A vehicle parked near my apartment complex that I'd never seen before. Someone leaving before I could get a good look. Footprints near my back patio after rain. None of it was enough to prove anything, but together, it created a constant feeling of unease. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Friday night. I was driving home from a service call that had run late. Around 10 p.m., I stopped at a red light in a mostly empty part of town. As I waited, headlights appeared behind me. I glanced in the mirror. Black pickup. My pulse immediately jumped. The truck remained behind me through 3 intersections, then 4, then 5. I decided to make an unexpected turn. The pickup followed. Another turn. Still there. At that point, there was no question. The truck was following me. I grabbed my phone and prepared to call police. Before I could, the truck suddenly accelerated and pulled alongside me. I looked over. The driver was the same man. He stared directly at me for several seconds without expression. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not an angry smile. Just a strange, calm smile. After that, he sped ahead and disappeared. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I reported everything. Unfortunately, I didn't have a plate number. Detectives took the report but admitted there wasn't much they could do. For the next 2 weeks, things were quiet. No sightings, no calls, no strange vehicles. I started convincing myself that maybe it was over. Then, one Sunday afternoon, I returned home from visiting family. As I unlocked my apartment door, I immediately noticed something wrong. The deadbolt was unlocked. I always locked it before leaving, every single time. A cold feeling ran through me. I pushed the door open carefully. Nothing appeared missing. The television was still there. My laptop remained on the desk. Everything looked normal. Then I noticed a kitchen chair positioned in the middle of my living room facing the hallway. I'd never placed it there. My heart began pounding. I backed outside and called police immediately. Officers searched the apartment. There were no signs of forced entry, but someone had definitely been inside. The worst discovery came minutes later. One officer entered my bedroom and called for his partner. When I stepped inside, I felt sick. Dozens of photographs were spread across my bed. Pictures of me leaving work, pictures of me pumping gas, pictures of me entering grocery stores, pictures of me unloading items from my truck. Some had clearly been taken from a distance. Others looked disturbingly close. There had to be at least 50 photographs. Police immediately treated the situation as a stalking case. Crime scene technicians processed everything for evidence. Several fingerprints were recovered. 3 days later, detectives identified a suspect. It was the man from the diner, the man from the black pickup, the man who had apparently been following me for months. What investigators discovered afterward was terrifying. The suspect had multiple prior arrests involving stalking and burglary. In 2 previous cases, he had become obsessed with strangers he encountered randomly in public places. According to detectives, he often spent months gathering information about victims before escalating. Fortunately, my case ended before he could go further. Police arrested him at a motel less than 20 miles away. Inside his room, they discovered hundreds of photographs, notebooks, maps, and detailed schedules involving several different individuals. To this day, nobody knows exactly why he targeted me. During interviews, he refused to explain his actions. Maybe there was no reason. Maybe I just happened to sit in the wrong diner on the wrong day. That's the part that still bothers me. There was no argument, no conflict, no interaction. I never even spoke to the man. Yet somehow I became the focus of his attention for months. I moved shortly afterward and changed nearly every part of my routine. Even now, whenever I notice the same stranger more than once in different places, I pay attention. Because the scariest lesson I learned is that some of the most dangerous people don't force their way into your life immediately. They quietly insert themselves into the background and wait until they know more about you than you realize. By the time you notice them, they've already been watching for a very long time.